The United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee will come to order. Today, we're going to hear from three of President Trump's nominees, and ordinarily we have a couple of senators to do introductions, but one's here, one isn't. So I think we'll start with the opening statements, and then we'll go to the introductions. So with that, I've got a few remarks. I'm going to yield to Senator Shaheen to give her remarks. Then we'll have introductions, and we'll have comments from the nominees, and then we will open it up to questions. For those of you who are here in the audience, as usual, we welcome you. This is an open hearing. I notice we have a lot of family and other friends here. I would, as always, state that this hearing is a business of the United States of America that's important, needs to go on. Any type of interruptions, any attempt to communicate from the audience, verbally or otherwise, will be met with a removal and arrest and ban from the committee for a year. That's the way we keep order here, but we're welcome to have you. So with that, today America will hear from the President's nominees to be U.S. ambassadors to some of our most important allies. The threats we face from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are too big for anyone to face alone. I hope our nominees would agree that we need mutually beneficial with our friends like Canada, Mexico, and Japan, and that they will act on day one to make this happen, and it's incredibly important. Our first nominee, Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, has served the people of Michigan in Congress for nearly 2 decades and is ambassador to the Netherlands in President Trump's first term. Now as ambassador to Canada, Ambassador Hoekstra, you will work with a country that is not just a neighbor, but a NATO treaty ally and major trade partner. I look forward to hearing about how you will urge our Canadian friends to increase their military spending, which they acknowledge publicly that they need to do. They need to modernize the North American Aerospace Defense Command to meet the real threats that both of our nations face. Canada must show meaningful change and fulfill its defense obligations. Canada's low contributions are not as helpful to the collective defense, the NATO's collective defense, as they can or they should be. Turning to Japan, Mr. Glass, you have an opportunity to further modernize the U.S.-Japanese alliance to ensure our countries are prepared to deter the long-term threats we face from China. President Trump's summit reaffirmed U.S. commitment to Japan's security, including through our nuclear umbrella. Our alliance is rock solid. To build on this foundation, we need to prioritize the important economic and security relationships the U.S. and Japan share with South Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan. Japan is stepping up its defense capabilities. Its decision to develop counter-strike capabilities is a key example of this. But like all our allies, Japan must do more to bolster its defenses. I hope that working with the Japanese to do this will be a priority for you. You also have a chance to strengthen our trade and investment relationships with Japan. We have some trade friction with Japan in my home state, in Idaho, that's been ongoing for a long time. Its market remains closed to our fresh potatoes, and we are not seeing progress. I hope you'll work with me to resolve this once you're confirmed. Finally, I'm pleased to welcome back Ambassador Johnson, who has served the United States government for over 4 decades, most recently as the U.S. Ambassador to El Salvador. As ambassador to Mexico, you'll face a unique set of challenges that are critical threats to U.S. national security. All of us are seriously concerned about the role of Mexican cartels in the manufacture and trafficking of lethal narcotics like fentanyl, and of course, in illegal immigration. These criminal activities pose unprecedented and direct threats to American families. Every state in America is truly a border state. President Trump's designation of cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, his enforcement of security at the border, and the vigorous enforcement of U.S. immigration laws to protect domestic security is to be thanked for and praised. Thanks to these policies under President Trump, we are seeing historically low illegal immigration numbers for the first time in decades. Ambassador Johnson, I hope you will work with the Mexican government to further combat illegal immigration, put a stop to drug trafficking from Mexico, and promote peace and stability in the Western Hemisphere by encouraging Mexico to do more to counter China, Russia, and other malign countries. The impending review of the USMCA will provide some opportunity to do this, and I hope you'll seize it. Thank you to all of our 3 witnesses for being here today. If confirmed, you'll have big jobs ahead of you. I look forward to working with you to improve these important bilateral relationships as we work to make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. With that, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our nominees this morning, and welcome also to your families and supporters who are here today. One of the greatest assets, as the chairman also pointed out, that we have in the United States is our strong alliances around the world and our friendly neighbors close to home. This traditionally has meant a wealth of opportunities for Americans, and that's certainly true in my home state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire's biggest export market is Canada. Our 3rd biggest is Mexico, followed by Japan. As the New Hampshire businesswoman who accompanied me to President Trump's speech to Congress last week stated, and I quote, "We rely on smooth international trade for sourcing raw materials and packaging that are either not grown or commercially available in the United States." But self-inflicted trade wars don't just cut off opportunities for small businesses in my state. They raise the price of gas, of groceries for Americans all across the country. And at the same time, the alliances that we've built since the end of World War II with nations like Japan go far beyond our trade relationship. These alliances have been the cornerstone to America's security for generations. Japan hosts almost 55,000 active duty U.S. service members on 15 major bases, more than any other country in the world. We work together on cyber defense, on missile technology, and on AI. And Japan has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. A recognition that defeating Putin in Ukraine is critical for the security of sovereign nations around the world, I think, is at the foundation of that support. As the former Japanese Prime Minister said in his address to Congress in the last couple of years, the Ukraine of today may be the East Asia of tomorrow. For our nominees today, if confirmed, you'll be leading efforts that are fundamental to our national interests. Combating corruption and fighting the flow of fentanyl through Mexico into the United States, strengthening our trade partnerships on behalf of American manufacturers and farmers, bolstering our allies like Japan, who live well within striking distance of North Korea and China. Ambassador Hoekstra, Ambassador Glass, Ambassador Johnson, if you are confirmed, you will be leading many of these efforts. So I would ask, how helpful is it to have President Trump bad-mouthing our alliance with Japan from the Oval Office? Should we make threats about Canadian sovereignty as it conducts its elections? Should we try to bully Mexico as we work together to fight drug cartels and curb immigration at our southern border? Unfortunately, the Trump administration's first month and a half in office does not inspire confidence and trust when it comes to our foreign policy, which is why we must make sure the United States has ambassadors who are suitable to represent our nation in the countries that they're assigned to. Ambassadors who can solidify and build on our long-standing alliances. So to our nominees, given some of your past statements, I hope you'll take this hearing as an opportunity to articulate your vision for positive engagement with Canada, Mexico, and Japan. How will you build on the successes that we've had over the years in those countries? How will you work with their governments to advance America's interest? I look forward to hearing your thoughts and plans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott, I'm going to give you the floor and the opportunity. You have some remarks in the introduction, please.
Okay. Chairman Risch, Ranking Member Shaheen, and members of the committee. It is an absolute honor to sit before you today to introduce Ron Johnson to serve as the next U.S. Ambassador to Mexico. I'd also like to recognize his wife, Alina, and their 4 children, Robert, Lori, Michael, and Joshua. Ron and Alina are also the proud grandparents of 8 grandchildren. As a grandfather of 7 myself, it's probably the best job in the world. President Trump made a fantastic pick with Ron Johnson. He has served our country for over 40 years and loves our country. First as a military officer in Army Special Forces, retiring as a Special Forces Colonel, and later as an operations officer at CIA with service around the world, including multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. finally serving as U.S. Ambassador to El Salvador from 2019 to 2021. Although his service to our nation has required him to frequently be away, Ron has been proud to call the great state of Florida his home for over 20 years. During Ron's service in El Salvador, he helped reduce illegal immigration to the U.S. by 80%. He worked with El Salvador's leadership to produce one of our best partnerships in the Western Hemisphere. As he was nearing the end of his appointment, El Salvador was consistently reporting the lowest number of violent crimes in history, and economic growth in the country has been improving. Now well poised to receive more foreign and domestic investment in its economic sectors. He also worked with Salvadorian and U.S. law enforcement authorities to increase counter-narcotic activities by 500% and to cooperate cross borders to investigate, track, arrest, prosecute, and extradite gang members operating in both countries. By the time Ron's service in El Salvador ended, the U.S.-El Salvador relationship was stronger than it had ever been. Ron's efforts were recognized in 2020 when the State Department awarded him the Sue M. Cobb Award for Exemplary Diplomatic Service. President Trump chose a leader who can deliver for Americans and for the great men and women of our diplomatic service who are stationed in Mexico. His extensive experience in special forces, CIA, and diplomacy make him an exceptional candidate to be the next ambassador to Mexico. With his and Secretary of State Marco Rubio's leadership, our diplomatic mission to Mexico will be successful. Over the past 4 years, Mexico has played a part in allowing terrorists, drugs, and illegal immigration across our border with the failed open border policies of the Biden administration. As we work to ensure Mexico does their part in curbing the border and fentanyl crisis, we need strong leadership like Ron at the helm. Ron is deeply committed to the men and women who serve. I am confident that his skills, character, expertise will make him an effective ambassador to Mexico. I look forward to hearing from him today on his vision for U.S.-Mexico relations, how he plans to combat illegal immigration and advance President Trump's agenda. Working with President Trump and Secretary Rubio, I'm confident he will help restore peace through strength and stand for America's best interests. You have my full support, and I urge my colleagues to advance your nomination quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. We appreciate those glowing words. We're now going to hear from each of the three nominees, and then we'll follow it up with a series of questions by the senators. I'd ask you to keep your remarks to about 5 minutes if you want to put more in the record. Obviously, you are more than welcome to do that. These three are incredibly important to us. Obviously, I've worked with the White House to prioritize our hearings on a basis that the countries that are incredibly important to us. These three countries are incredibly important to us. So we're anxious to hear what you have to say and how you can better the relationship. So with that, we're going to start with Mr. Hoekstra. You will be up first. You have opportunity to do about 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. I'd like to submit my entire statement for the record.
It will be concluded.
Great, thank you. Chairman Risch, Ranking Member Shaheen, distinguished members of the committee, it's an honor to be in front of you. It's good to be back on the Hill. This is a special place, and walking into the Capitol and recognizing that for 18 years I had the opportunity to call that my office was a time that I will never forget. I'm deeply appreciative to President Trump for his nomination to be the next U.S. Ambassador to Canada. With your concurrence and approval, I look forward to beginning my work in Canada and once again serving the people of the United States of America. As all of you know, public service takes a tremendous amount of support from our families, our community, to make our service possible. I'd like to recognize my wife, Diane. This summer, she and I will celebrate 50 years of marriage for the faith, for the total support that she has provided to me, our kids, and our family as we spent that time in public service. It would not have been possible without her, and that, as you all know, there are highs in the life of politicians, and there are lows. And living in the public eye can be great, and it can be challenging. But for us, public service has been a tremendous honor and a privilege, and we're deeply appreciative to have had that opportunity. Also in public service, I want to thank a couple of other ambassadors. Shefali Dugal, whom some of you may know, she succeeded me in the Netherlands. We built a very, very supportive relationship. She invited me and the family to come back to the Netherlands for our 4th of July celebrations, and the Dutch were amazed. You have a person who was a strong supporter of the Biden administration and a Trump ambassador, and they looked at us and said, "Pete, why are you here?" And it's like, well, because Shefali is a friend and she invited us. And they were amazed because too often as they read the headlines coming out of the United States, they find it hard to believe that Republicans and Democrats actually talk to each other. I'm deeply appreciative to David Cohen, President Biden's ambassador, the former ambassador to Canada. He and I had a congratulatory phone call, and he pledged, his support and help to make sure that, if confirmed, my transition to Canada, he would be there to assist in whatever way possible. I think it's a great testament to the people that have been confirmed by this committee and the standards that have been set in terms of the kinds of relationships that help us be effective and send a message across, across the borders that Republicans and Democrats are united in promoting the interests of the United States of America. We have our differences, but we are committed to the success of the United States of America. I'm an immigrant. My parents immigrated when I was 3 years old. They had experience with the Americans. It was the Allies that liberated my parents in the Netherlands during World War II. Specifically, it was the Canadians that liberated the parts of the Netherlands where my parents lived. So they are deeply appreciative for the service of Canada and America in liberating the Netherlands. My dad said he came here because this was the land of opportunity. My mom came here and she said, I thought we were coming here for an adventure. What they found out that it ended up being true for both of them. 36 years after coming to the United States of America, they were able to see their son get sworn into the U.S. House of Representatives, a tremendous honor. Hailing from Michigan, I do have a special appreciation for Canada as a neighbor. My home state is connected to Canada by 4 and soon to be 5 bridge crossings, a long maritime border across the Great Lakes, vital links that drive businesses, jobs, and livelihood in both states. If confirmed, I will work tirelessly to build on that record of cooperation and extend it, obviously, nationally. I think there's 36 states that see Canada as their #1 trading partner internationally. As a congressman, I have frequently interacted with Canadians on trade, military, intelligence, cultural issues. Obviously, they're part of NATO. They're also part of Five Eyes, so that relationship goes deep. As an ambassador, it'd be my honor to promote U.S. interests and protect U.S. citizens. I recognize the obligation of implementing the strategies and policies of the United States. I recognize my responsibility to the President of the United States, to the citizens of America, but I'm also a man of the House. I recognize my responsibility to the members of Congress. I want to develop a partnership, and I look forward to working with you on the issues and the strategies that we put in place in Canada to address the issues. With your approval, I look forward to once again having the opportunity to serve this great country and the American people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments, and welcome your wife. Those of us that have been married that long and been through this up and down can certainly relate to that. Vicki and I have been 56 years together. We've been through 36 elections, and I can tell you your comments about the ups and downs are very accurate. There's no question about that. Mr. Glass, you're up. Let's hear what you have to say about Japan.
Great. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to thank Senator Hagerty in advance, who'll be doing the introduction. So to begin, thank you, Senator Hagerty, for the kind introduction. It's an honor to follow in your footsteps and call on you for advice, support, and friendship. And thank you for your long history of service to this country and to the great state of Tennessee and to the United States-Japan relationship. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Shaheen, and distinguished members of the committee, I am humbled and honored to stand before you as President Donald Trump's nominee to be the ambassador to Japan. I'm grateful to President Trump and Secretary Rubio's strength on the global stage, and I pledge to follow their lead, always putting America first and unabashedly promoting the interest of the American people. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the love of my life for 40 years, so I'm not up with the rest of you. But Mary, who is sitting behind me, she flew in just last night to be here today. I'd like to acknowledge and thank my mother and stepfather, Mary and Jay, as well as Mary's parents, Joe and Lori Ferguson, for the values that they've instilled in us and that I will carry forward as ambassador if confirmed. I'm thankful for my 3 sons, Gordon, George, and Andrew, their wives, and 6 grandchildren who have sent their prayers today and best wishes from afar. And I want to recognize my Father, who watches over me always, and on this day especially, from heaven. We stand at the dawn of a new golden era between U.S. and Japan relations. As we approach the 80th anniversaries of the Battle of Iwo Jima and the end of World War II, it's remarkable to reflect on the evolution of this great relationship. America and Japan are now the strongest of allies. Japan is the top foreign investor in the United States, supporting 1 million U.S. jobs, including 500,000 in manufacturing. Cultural and educational ties bind our 2 people through decades of bilateral exchanges, joint research, art, and film. The U.S.-Japan alliance, celebrating its 65th anniversary this year, is the cornerstone of peace and stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and in that entire region and beyond. And our shared values facilitate cooperation in the G7, the Quad, and trilateral engagements with South Korea and the Philippines and more. There are certainly challenges, and it's one to manage your relationship with an adversary, but it's quite another to manage your relationship with a friend. If confirmed, I will have tough conversations on tariffs and reducing our trade deficit with Japan. I will make sure Japan continues to increase its support for the defense of the region, our alliance, and our troops, and to ensure that our relationship works for the American people. I will make sure that we are uncompromising in our efforts to protect American citizens abroad. As ambassador to Portugal, I fought for American interests every day and earned the respect of the Portuguese president and prime minister. I was knighted with the Order of Prince Henry the Navigator, the highest honor that an American can receive. And thanks to the fantastic work of my team at the U.S. Embassy in Lisbon, I was also honored to receive the State Department's Sue Cobb Award, granted annually to the most effective and impactful non-career ambassador. If confirmed, I will work just as hard, leading a group of deeply experienced and dedicated diplomats at Mission Japan on behalf of the American people. The opportunities are vast. Japan is committed to reduce the trade deficit with us and its reliance on Russia by purchasing U.S. liquefied natural gas. If confirmed, I will hold them to that promise. Japan is committed to extending the upward trajectory of its defense budget, building capabilities that advance both our national security goals and strengthen deterrence in the region. If confirmed, I will hold them to that promise. And Japan is committed to build supply chain resilience, particularly in critical metals, and deeper collaboration on cutting-edge technologies, from quantum computing to AI to semiconductor processing. If confirmed, I will hold them to that promise. I'm grateful for the chance to work with the people of Japan, who 80 years ago launched an economic miracle and a vast societal transformation that brought them to where they are today. Japan is the world's 4th largest economy, the top investor in 39 of our 50 states, and our most impactful partner and ally for promoting peace and stability. Japan is known around the world for both its ancient traditions and modern innovations, which will shine brightly at the World Expo in 2025 in Osaka. If confirmed, I will ensure the funding generously provided by Congress for the U.S. Pavilion is used to showcase all that makes our country great on the global stage. I would like to close by saying this nomination is not just business, it is deeply personal. My eldest son, Gordon, and his wife, Yao, have lived in Japan for 13 years. My granddaughter, who is now 6.5 years old, was sworn in as a U.S. citizen by Senator Hagerty when he was ambassador to Japan. She is a product of the Japanese system. She is taught to be kind, hardworking, and inquisitive. She embraces the best qualities of both our countries. If confirmed, I will work tirelessly to make the U.S.-Japan relationship even stronger than I found it, with the added blessing of being able to live close to my granddaughter. Distinguished senators, I thank you again for your time today. If confirmed, it would be the honor of my life to once again serve the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. Thank you.
Chairman Risch, Ranking Member. We'll start again. Chairman Risch, Ranking Member Shaheen, and distinguished members of this committee. I'm truly honored to appear before you today as the President's nominee to serve as United States Ambassador to the United Mexican States. I'm very grateful to President Trump for the faith and confidence he's placed in me and to Secretary Rubio for his support. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had to meet with many of you and for your consideration today as I sit before you in this time-honored process. I'm humbled at the opportunity to serve our nation in this capacity and especially at such an important period in our relationship with Mexico. If confirmed, I look forward to a continuing dialogue with you on your priority issues. I'm supported in this endeavor by a strong and patriotic family. My wife, Alina, who is with us today, immigrated to this country with her parents over 60 years ago as a refugee from Cuba. My government service has required frequent separations and duty in high-risk areas, but together we've managed to raise 4 children, Robert, who is here today, Lori, Michael, and Joshua. Our parents have all passed away, but we're people of great faith, and we believe they look down upon us today with pride and compassion. In their lifetime, it was sometimes hard to get by, but they weren't satisfied with just getting by. They wanted to pass on a better life for their children, to build better communities, a better nation, and in the process, a better world. Our youngest son, Joshua, is a veteran of the Iraq War. Together, we represent the 3rd and 4th generation of our family who have served the nation in combat. My father was a small business owner, and my mother's father was a sharecropper in Alabama. My in-laws came here from Cuba with nothing, and they both worked well after what is today considered retirement age. They understood just how fragile freedom is, and they loved the USA. Our parents instilled values like honesty, respect, accountability, and a strong work ethic in their children. If confirmed, those values of initiative, enterprise, and integrity will remain constant in my pursuit to promote U.S. interest in Mexico. Our relationship with Mexico is one of paramount importance and complexity. We share a nearly 2,000-mile border, and our deep economic integration, shared security and border challenges, and strong cultural ties reflect Mexico's role as an essential partner. If confirmed, I'll advance this administration's top national security priorities, including securing our border from the flows of illegal drugs and aliens, ensuring a fair playing field for U.S. businesses and workers. I'll work tirelessly to address the issues that directly impact U.S. citizens, from transboundary pollution in Southern California to securing water deliveries for communities in Texas. The first priority will be to ensure the rule of law at the border. If confirmed, I will foster cooperation with Mexican authorities to halt and deter further illegal alien flows and to accept the deportation of their citizens who are currently in the United States illegally. Mexico's recent actions to secure the border demonstrate the power of our partnership, including its deployment of 10,000 National Guard troops to the border and acceptance of the deportation of illegal aliens. Neither country can solve the challenge of illegal immigration alone, and I'm convinced that we can find solutions that will benefit both our nations. Among my highest priorities will be the protection of the American people. Mission Mexico is one of the largest U.S. diplomatic missions in the world, with 3,300 employees, 9 consulates, and 9 consular agencies. And I fully understand and appreciate the value of those consular services to our fellow Americans and your constituents. If confirmed, I will take seriously the solemn obligation of protecting U.S. citizens who live in and visit Mexico. This includes working with Mexican authorities to dismantle drug cartels that sow violence and addressing the scourge of illegal drugs that inflict harm on our communities in both the United States and Mexico. Mexico has surpassed China as the United States' #1 trading partner, Last year, bilateral trade hit a record $840 billion, over $1.5 billion exchanged every minute. If confirmed, I will work to ensure U.S. companies and workers are treated fairly as we look towards the USMCA review and clearing a path for shared prosperity while safeguarding U.S. economic security, including protection from predatory Chinese trade practices. There's a lot to celebrate about our relationship with Mexico that often gets lost amidst discussions of the challenges. More than 10% of all Americans, some 40 million people, are of Mexican heritage. Our cultures have grown increasingly intertwined, and our societies share a spirit of optimism and new thinking that allows us to connect and collaborate to meet shared challenges. In summary, our relationship with Mexico is unique in its direct impact on the security and prosperity of American people. And if confirmed, I pledge to be a good and faithful steward of that relationship. Thank you.
5-minute questions. And first of all, for the panel and for the audience, people are coming and going because, number one, we got a vote going on, and number two, we got a number of committee meetings going on where they're actually doing markups and voting and what have you. So don't be distracted, but I can assure you, Senator Shaheen and I can run the ship by ourselves if we have to. So here we are. Anyway, we will do a 5-minute round, then we'll actually go back and do a second if there's interest in that. So, Mr. Glass, I want to start with you. Are you familiar with the? First of all, my state has a really good relationship with Japan, and they're a trading partner. They're an important trading partner. We love them. They love us. But we got one problem. Potatoes is somewhat important to Idaho, as you may or may not know. Are you familiar with the ongoing fight we've had with Japan over the years on the potato issue?
I've certainly read about it.
It's all right.
I've certainly read about it in the media, and we've had some discussions on that, yes.
You're going to learn a lot more if you, assuming you're confirmed, which I'm sure will happen. But that is something that's absolutely critical to us, and it's a kind of thing that causes countries to get riled up when there's really no reason for it other than pure unadulterated protectionism. Everybody talks about free trade, but then you wind up with rules and regs that dress up like health issues or something like that, and all they are is protectionism. So we'll talk some more about that in private. Any other thoughts you have on that?
I certainly do. In fact, thank you very much for the question, because I have quite a bit of experience working with the Department of Agriculture on non-tariff trade barriers. We were dealing with that in Portugal actually with soybeans, and it had to do with a very nuanced regulatory issue up at the EU. And as we looked into it, it ended up something that we could change, and we did. And we went from virtually having no agricultural trade in Portugal between the Portuguese and the United States to hundreds of millions of dollars of soybeans. And most of these just take some determination. It tends to, when you were dealing with great bureaucracies of other governments, especially with something like the EU, you have to have a bit of patience. But I'm very determined to take care of being a believer in free, fair, and reciprocal trade, which is effectively the agenda of the Trump administration. I will work hard on that, and I take that very seriously. My mom's family are ranchers and farmers in Pendleton, which is right near the great state of Idaho. I was born and raised, and we raised our kids in Oregon, so we're very familiar with working with agriculture to make that happen. So I will work directly with your office if confirmed, and we'll see what we can do on that.
Thank you much. Probably been to the Pendleton Roundup.
Many times.
Where the Idaho Cowboys compete with the Oregon Cowboys.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Mr. Johnson, give us some hope here. I think most Americans are not fully dialed in with the dire situation in Mexico with violence and drugs. Their elections last year, there were hundreds, I forgot the exact number, but it's in the hundreds of candidates who were assassinated simply because they were running for public office. This is a tragedy, and it's a code of conduct and a method of doing business that just isn't acceptable for civilized people. Mexico has such tremendous potential in front of it with the people they have, the culture they have, the resources they have, but they got problems with drugs and crime. Give us some hope here. What are your thoughts on this? What do we have to do to help them move forward? Because we can't do it. As always, it's going to be up to the society themselves to do it. Give us some hope here.
Thank you for that question, Senator. I couldn't agree with you more, but I have to say I feel extremely positive about the communication that has occurred between President Sheinbaum and President Trump and the actions that we've seen Mexico recently take. 2 weeks ago today, we had a senior Mexican delegation here in Washington, D.C., and they met with Secretary Rubio. I believe the Secretary of Defense was there, and the Attorney General was also there. And as a result of that meeting, we saw the extradition of 29 criminals that were engaged in some of the activities that are harming Americans. And I believe we've seen additional arrests made based on information that was obtained from them already, and I think we'll see more. The other thing that occurred back in Mexico is we've seen a tightening of security against the cartels that has been done by the Mexican authorities. I'm hearing rumors that some cartel members are reluctant to leave their compound now, and that's very good news. I think, and you touched on this, I think our economies are entwined in such a way that what is good to make America stronger, safer, and more prosperous also holds true for Mexico. And I'm encouraged by some of the comments that I've seen out of the Sheinbaum government recently, comments she's made herself on prioritizing the relationship with the United States over that of China. I think Latin America is beginning to wake up to the fact that China does not have their interest in mind, and that creates opportunities for us.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Appreciate those thoughts. They've got a long ways to go, and we want to help every way we can. Mr. Hoekstra, are you familiar with the negotiations that are going on over the Columbia River Treaty?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
I've been involved in that on a bipartisan basis, and that's an important issue. My time's up, so we'll talk about it either on the second round or we'll talk about it privately, but it's something that we need to get that redone. It's in the process. It's moving along at a snail's pace, but I think we can get there. With that, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador, Congressman Hoekstra, the U.S.-Canada bilateral relationship is at a historic low point. Recent polling in Canada showed that 75% of Canadians have an unfavorable opinion of President Trump, and 27% view the U.S. as an enemy. 30%, only 30% still view the U.S. as an ally. I come from a state that borders Canada. I know when you were in Congress, you represented a district that bordered Canada. We have the highest percentage of Canadian Americans of any state in the country. I find it very troubling that we are seeing our national anthem booed at ice hockey games, and that the country where we've got the longest undefended border in the world, where we have had such a positive relationship over the years, is now viewing America in the way they are because of this president's statements. They find it particularly offensive that he's talking about Canada as the 51st state. And I don't blame him, I gotta be honest. So how do you, I appreciated your opening statement and your talking about the importance of Canada to the United States, but how do you see approaching turning around that negative relationship that has developed because of the president's statements, and how do you envision addressing tariff issues
It's a great question. Obviously, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that myself, pending, the confirmation by the Senate of having to go there and being kind of the tip of the spear on this. I experienced similar things when I went to the Netherlands. There was a lot of hostility or concern about some of the objectives of the first Trump administration, which were really about fairness, getting the Dutch to pay for NATO, all right? Working with the Dutch to confront Russia on Nord Stream, the pipeline. The Dutch are great with water. They have money, so they were helping build it and to finance it. And what we really spent a tremendous amount of time on is focusing on the strength of the relationship between our two countries. Your state, my state, we have thousands of people, thousands of businesses that rely on this relationship, and they just, they see what's going on at 30,000 feet, but they got to go to work every day, and they need to make this work. We have cooperated with Canada on so many things. In Michigan, it's the Great Lakes. That's important to us. It's trade. It's business. My experience on the Intel Committee, it is about NATO and those types of things. Canada is part of Five Eyes. So we have a great history of working together, and we know how to make this work. We now have to make and take that and say, we know how to make this work. Now let's do it and apply our experience to the priorities that the President has outlined. Freer, fairer trade, so that we can actually grow the business relationship between Canada
But
and the U.S.
excuse me for interrupting, but
Yeah.
isn't it true that Canada has one of the lowest tariff regimes of any country in the world? And that with the exception of dairy, which the president has pointed out and which I know we're still working on, that actually the tariffs in Canada are not outlandishly restrictive, and we've gotten along very well. I have small businesses in New Hampshire. One in particular called me over the weekend. They make sugar-free candy. They have a retail store in one community and a factory in another. They do 85% of their business with Canada, and Canada has now canceled all of their orders. So they're not sure they're going to be able to continue to operate. And I hear that story time and time again from small businesses in New Hampshire. So how is this trade war helping our economy here, and what are the metrics that the president has that say that when Canada and the United States reach this agreement that we're going to stop the trade war? Because everybody's operating, or we thought we were operating, under an agreement that the president actually negotiated when he was in his first term and credited as being the best trade agreement ever negotiated in the United States.
Yeah, thanks for the follow-up. I think the president has outlined a series of priorities relating to Canada. Trade and freer, fairer trade with Canada is one. Also, a request to work with the United States on the issue of fentanyl, something that I know is a very important issue in New Hampshire. Across the country, we lose 55,000 people per year.
We do, absolutely, and we have less than 1% of the fentanyl that comes into this country comes from Canada. They actually, last year, interdicted more drugs from the United States than we interdicted from Canada. Yeah. And, I agree, we need to get rid of all fentanyl, and that's important. But let's be honest about what's happening here. I'm sorry I'm over time, and so I'll call on Senator Scott.
Right. Ambassador Johnson, given the current U.S.-Mexico relations, why do you want to serve in Mexico, and how do you intend to manage that relationship while representing America's best interest?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think it's a time for opportunity. I think the relationship between Mexico and the United States is poised and ready to launch forward in a way that will guarantee more security for Mexican citizens and U.S. citizens, and also help improve the economies in both countries. I'm particularly interested in working on increasing the current trade relationship that we have, which is the #1 trade relationship that we have with anyone right now. And I think looking at some of the opportunities inside Mexico. I was looking, for example, at the microprocessor design and assembly and testing and packaging. Right now, most of those are designed in the United States. They're tested and packaged and assembled in mostly in Asia, in China and Taiwan, but also in other Asian countries. And I think there's an opportunity before us to look at moving that assembly, testing, and packaging to places in Mexico that still provide labor that's perhaps less expensive than labor would be here in the United States because it's very labor intensive. But I think Mexico recognizes the fact that that's an opportunity for them to economically move forward. And I'm encouraged that President Sheinbaum has also said she places a higher priority on the economic relationship with the United States than she does with China, which is purely logical. But I think there's numerous estimates that both economies and the United States and Mexico could grow significantly by increasing the economic and trade relationship, and that would be one of the focuses in addition to stopping the drugs and illegal immigration flows. So, sir, I'm excited about being there. I think it is a time to make a difference in the world, and that's what I've always tried to do throughout my career, is just be a positive force. Thank you.
So Florida farmers have seen that Mexico completely disregarded parts of the USMCA. So they've dumped, especially our specialty crop, tomatoes, blueberries, strawberries, they've just dumped on our markets. So can you speak to how you're going to hold Mexico accountable for complying with all of the USMCA, ensuring the relationship benefits both countries, not just Mexico?
Thank you for the follow-up, sir, and I appreciate the time we spent together in your office the other day to discuss that issue. I was not fully aware of the issues that Florida farmers face. I am now. I'm encouraged by the fact that the official review of the USMCA occurs in 26. That said, I expect to be deeply involved from the time I arrive in Mexico in helping to ensure that Mexico understands all of its obligations, not just the obligations on trade, but all the obligations that they've made in various treaties, to include the water treaty with Texas and obligations they've made to help us secure the border and stop the flow of fentanyl. So I think key to that is establishing a good dialogue and working relationship across the entire Mexican government, and I plan to do that.
Ambassador Glass, I think all of us realize the importance of a relationship with Japan. We've got a lot of servicemen and women over there. Can you talk about how you're going to make sure that we continue to have a positive relationship between our servicemen and women and the people of Japan?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Without a doubt, I have a little bit of a different situation than the two gentlemen on my sides. The relationship between the United States and Japan is at an apex. It's at an all-time high, and demonstrated on February 7th with the President and the Prime Minister, where discussions went on everything from security to economics. We currently have 60,000 troops that are located, our brave men and women that are located in Japan. We have the most sophisticated weaponry. We have a carrier group. And the cooperation that goes on between the two is at a level that actually it's probably one of the biggest challenges, is to make that level better. We have currently a backlog of over $50 billion of items and materials and planes that are being ordered from Japan, from the United States. We've got to work that backlog through. That is an issue. We're actually working on co-production of some of those items with the Japanese moving forwards. And so it is clearly the highest priority that we have, is to continue the closeness of this relationship from everything from security to economics.
Thank you. Recognize Senator Kaine.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks to the panel. This is a power-packed panel. So all three of you have been ambassadors, and the three nations you're nominated to serve as ambassadors are three of our top 5 trading partners, Mexico #1, Canada #3, Japan #5. So we don't have a panel like this very often. And so first, congratulations on your nomination to posts as important as this. The nations of Canada, Japan, and Mexico are also partners and friends. Not friends without challenges. You know, a friendship that hadn't been tested by a challenge isn't a friendship. So all of these are relationship with challenges. But this is not a hard call as to whether Canada, Japan, and Mexico are on the friend side of the ledger or the adversary. They're on the friend side of the ledger. And I am a strong believer that we are stronger as a nation when we link arms with friends against adversaries and not get confused about who is a friend and who isn't. And I'm troubled by actions in the first couple months, some of which may be negotiation tactics, but I am troubled by actions in the first couple months that are making some of our friends, including Canada especially, wonder if, in fact, we recognize the values of friendship that have stretched for centuries. Mr. Johnson, I want to focus my questions on you. I wish I had 20 minutes. I'd get to all of you, but I'm the chairman of the lead Democrat, the ranking member on the Western Hemisphere subcommittee here, and your service in Salvador, your nomination to Mexico is really important. I want to ask a question about rule of law and sort of some tendencies toward authoritarianism in Mexico, but I'll begin with a precursor. You did have a very strong reputation in your service in El Salvador. There were a number of things going well. There were also some things that were causing major concerns. There was an incident when you were ambassador where President Bukele sent troops into the National Assembly to try to strong-arm a vote on something that he thought was important. And my recollection, and I'd be happy to be corrected about this, is that you did not say anything publicly about that clearly sort of authoritarian move. I have been in other nations in the Americas where similar things have happened, and either the ambassador or the charge, in one case it was in Guatemala, spoke up pretty strongly against obvious authoritarian moves. I'm less interested in the Salvador side. I'm really interested in Mexico. A couple of things are happening in Mexico. One involves Senator Hagerty, and I know he might ask you about it. There have been efforts to try to seize American property in Mexico. There's a company, Vulcan, that operates in a number of states that has property in Mexico where the AMLO government was clearly trying to seize it, even using military to do so. And the current Mexican government has been a little bit unclear about the posture they're going to take. Are they going to continue that or not? Similarly, there have been actions in Mexico to reduce the independence of the judiciary, and largely that has been seen as an effort to clip the wings of a judiciary that might stand up against corruption, stand up against, single-party rule, dangerous to the rule of law. Should you be confirmed in Mexico, how do you see the current situation there, and how could you use your service as an ambassador to promote rule of law, to promote protection of property rights, and to put some kind of a check, or at least public warning, against drifts toward authoritarianism?
Senator, thank you for the question, and thank you for your continuing interest in Latin America for many decades now, especially Honduras. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to first address what occurred on February the 6th in, I believe it was 2020, in El Salvador, when President Bukele entered the assembly on a Sunday with armed troops. First of all, I am publicly on the record saying that I did not condone what he did. And something that few people know is that I was in contact with him moments before he made the decision, and I was telling him not to go, do not do this.
How far in advance of that were you aware that that was his intent?
I think hours in advance. I mean, it happened on a weekend. I believe it was on a Sunday, and it was an emergency session of Congress, and some members resented that they were being called in and didn't show up. And there were people on both sides that were demonstrating. It was a peaceful demonstration, a truly peaceful demonstration. And one thing that I've used to highlight the entrance into the assembly, President Bukele has no plainclothes security. That was the only security he has. And one thing that I think emphasizes how peaceful it was is they had to wait 45 minutes to delay entering 45 minutes to wait for the guy with the key to show up to open the door. There have been previous times at the assembly in El Salvador that had not been nearly that peaceful. But we did address it, and I did criticize him publicly for doing that, as well as privately. We had long discussions about it. Mexico is much different. I think the key anywhere to a relationship like that is to establish a trust and confidence in each other early on in the relationship. I think the way to do that is to look at things that are mutually beneficial to both the United States and Mexico and focus, at least initially, focus your energy on those things. I think in terms of U.S. businesses and property seizures of U.S. foreign investments in Mexico is a signal to the world that frightens other potential investors. And I think by engaging and having a dialogue about how this might affect your future and how your economy could move forward or could move backward purely based on foreign investment in Mexico. They're right now, I believe, if they're not number one, they're close to being our number one foreign investment location too. So I think the key to that is just having that constant dialogue and building trust.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Senator Coons.
Thank you. Thank you to all three of you, former ambassadors, to your spouses, to your families for your willingness to serve. And I look forward to our conversation today and to working with you and following up with you afterwards. Mr. Johnson, if I might, thank you for your military service and that of many in your family, to Alina and your children. I've heard loud and clear in your testimony that securing the southern border is among your top priorities. It's among mine, and I'd like to be a partner in this. But one of my concerns is the drivers of irregular migration throughout the hemisphere that lead to people being at the southern border between the United States and Mexico. You would, I assume, agree that thousands of people leave their homes because of political violence, criminal and gang violence, instability from drug trafficking, and lack of economic opportunity. Do those strike you as some of the real drivers of migration?
Yes, sir, Senator. Thank you. They do.
So then, doesn't it stand to reason that we should be partnering throughout the region with countries to deter or stop those drivers of migration by training local security forces, conducting joint operations to combat fentanyl, providing support to screen for illegal drugs at airports and borders, and combating migrant smuggling and human trafficking?
Yes, sir.
Then all I'm going to say is I was the chair of the subcommittee that appropriated the funding for USAID and the State Department in the last Congress. I am really concerned about the impact of the review of foreign aid and how the chaos of rescissions and waivers and funding flows has largely shut down key programs that were working to deter young people from partnering with human traffickers, to deter drug smuggling. Will you pledge to work with me on trying to find ways to identify programs that are effective and that have actually helped our partnership with the Mexican government in preventing the flow of migrants to our southern border?
Thank you, Senator. I absolutely look forward to working with you on that. And I want to thank you again for a visit you made to El Salvador when I was there. I think we would have had more if it hadn't been for COVID, but thank you for that. That was important.
Sovereignty, if I could, because I'm going to try and get questions into at least one other. Sovereignty is a key core principle. I understand that the designation of the drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations reflects widespread concern and anger in the United States about the cartels and the impact of fentanyl. Would you agree that we should not take any military action against cartels in Mexican territory without the knowledge and consent of the Mexican government?
Sir, I think any decision to take action against a cartel inside Mexico, our first desire would be that it be done in partnership with our Mexican partners. That said, I know that President Trump takes very seriously his responsibility to safeguard the lives of U.S. citizens, and should there be a case where the lives of U.S. citizens are at risk, I think all cards are on the table. I cannot respond to what the Commander-in-Chief might decide based on the information he has. I've been a private citizen for the last 4 years, but
Well,
I think we would prefer to work with our partners in Mexico, yes.
Let me just make an assertion, if I might, Ambassador. You recognize Mexico as our #1 trading partner. You talked about how we could find positive ways to further integrate supply chains, further partner with them. We have big opportunities. We have to balance these two. USMCA, one of the main accomplishments of the first Trump administration, the integration of our economies, Canada, US, Mexico, very positive. But if we were to take action without consultation and without permission, then we are putting at real risk that. And that's been a give and take that I hope will involve respect for sovereignty. Ambassador Hoekstra, if I might briefly, my colleague, Senator Kaine, referenced ways in which negotiation tactics have profoundly unsettled our relationship with Canada. Would you agree that Canada is a sovereign state and should not be even jokingly referred to as the 51st state?
Thank you. Canada is a sovereign state, yes. How the president and the relationship between the former prime minister in Canada, the characteristics and nature of that relationship, I don't know. Okay.
I
Is
view
it
as a
one where there's
positive, sir,
humor
that we
and-
have a new prime minister in Canada.
Yes.
And a chance for a reset. Given my time, I will simply assert that Mexico, Japan, and Canada are among our most important allies. I'm very encouraged there is a positive start to the U.S.-Japan relationship with the meeting with Prime Minister Ishida. But I am hopeful that casual threats about throwing Canada out of Five Eyes, not respecting our border treaty, and there potentially being annexed as a 51st state will stop, and that a positive, respectful conversation about our close integration will continue. I look forward to working with you on pressing the Canadians to increase their defense investment and pressing the Canadians to meet some of our trading objectives, but also I will continue to press for a reduction in some of the rhetoric that I think has destabilized our relationship. I'll also recognize that the amount of fentanyl coming into the United States from Canada is minuscule relative to the very real challenge at our southern border, and I hope we can find a way to move forward in the U.S.-Canada relationship, the U.S.-Japan relationship, and the U.S.-Mexico relationship with the leadership of all three of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hagerty.
Chairman Risch, thank you very much for indulging my complicated schedule today. We have a contentious markup in
You're not
banking
the
and
only
running.
one, as you can see.
So I appreciate that. And to say this is a wonderful honor for me to get the opportunity to introduce some good friends to this committee. I'm sorry not to be here at the outset to do that, but I'd like to say it was the honor of a lifetime for me to serve as U.S. Ambassador for the greatest nation in the world when I served as U.S. Ambassador to Japan. So I'm speaking from experience as I make some comments. First, I'd like to start with my good friend George Glassberry. It's good to see you here as well. George has all the qualities necessary to excel in a very strategically important post Japan. George is a lifelong businessman with more than 30 years of experience closing deals and creating value. We need someone like Ambassador Glass at Mission Japan. George is an accomplished businessman who is well positioned to capitalize on what I see as is an enormous opportunity to further strengthen U.S.-Japanese economic and strategic ties. Importantly, George is an experienced diplomat who served as U.S. Ambassador to Portugal during President Trump's first term, earning the State Department's award for exemplary diplomatic service. During his time in Lisbon, George strengthened economic ties between the United States and Portugal, supported the U.S. military, and countered Chinese malign influence abroad. In other words, George, in his first ambassadorial role, demonstrated that he is precisely the type of diplomatic leader that America needs to further President Trump's foreign policy agenda in Japan and in the broader Indo-Pacific region. Finally, George is a man of deep faith, with the drive and the conviction to tackle the toughest challenges. And if confirmed, George will make an outstanding U.S. ambassador to Japan. Let me now turn to President Trump's nominee for U.S. ambassador to Canada. That's my good friend Pete Hoekstra. Among Pete's many accomplishments and qualifications are his 18 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, where he represented his district in Michigan, and he served as a pivotal leader on the Hill. As chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, for example, Pete was a key in driving bipartisan laws to overhaul and improve the effectiveness of our intelligence community after 9/11. Pete is also an experienced diplomat who served with distinction as U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands during President Trump's first term. He knows how to foster cooperation and advance shared goals with our partners while protecting U.S. interests, which are skills absolutely essential for success in Canada. With his distinguished foreign policy background and his passion for public service, Pete is the right man to represent the United States of America and Canada during this critical and important moment. And while I'm up here, I'd just like to say a quick word about Ambassador Ronald Johnson. While I don't know Ambassador Johnson as well as I know the others here today, I've had the benefit of getting to know him. And I have been most impressed by his deep background in the military, in the U.S. intelligence community, and his accomplishments as U.S. Ambassador to El Salvador. As a former U.S. Ambassador myself, I believe that Ambassador Johnson is just the sort of diplomat that we need in Mexico City to strengthen our bilateral relations at a very critical time. Again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for the opportunity to introduce George, Pete, and to speak to Ronald's qualifications. I look forward to the rest of our discussion this morning, and I look forward to seeing them all passed out of committee today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hagerty. Senator, where are we here? I guess, Dave, you're up. Senator McCormick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to a great panel appearing before us. I want to start with you, Ambassador Johnson. It was great to meet you the other day. We discussed fentanyl overdoses in Pennsylvania and the huge problem it's created. The Mexican government, I think we agree, needs to do more, and I think your experience in the military and intelligence in the region will help a lot. What is your assessment of the new Mexican government and its high-profile raids and security policies directed at the cartels? What do you think these have been effective thus far, and what are you seeing?
Thank you, Senator. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing recently in Mexico. I think there are obviously opportunities to improve, but also President Sheinbaum has not been in office that long. I think there's opportunities for us to work together more closely, and in particular, when it comes to the sharing of intelligence information with JTF Alpha, JTF Bravo, who track precursor chemicals and the shipment of drugs to and from Mexico. And I think if we can work to further that relationship and ensure that we are shoulder to shoulder with our partners in Mexico, I think they will rise to the occasion. I've seen more recognition out of them recently than ever, and the realization that the drug problem comes with violence and that the violence in Mexico has been horrible. It led to the death of many politicians. It is truly the definition of terrorism because of the horrific deeds that are conducted against the communities. And I think there's a lot of Mexican people that are not, they're not corrupted by the money. They're coerced by the fear of what will happen to their family if they don't look the other way or provide support in some way to the cartels. So I think there's a great opportunity there to work with them on providing security for those that are doing the right thing.
Good, thank you. And a piece of that problem, as we talked about, and a broader problem is China using its mercantilist policies, but also its trade with fentanyl prefactors coming into Mexico, and also circumventing some of our trade agreements by manufacturing in Mexico and exporting into the United States. Would you care to comment on what role you would hope to play in influencing Mexico and its relationship with China?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. I'm also encouraged by what President Sheinbaum has said about prioritizing relationships. I think what I'm seeing in Mexico and even in other locations in Latin America, people are beginning to realize that China does not have their interest in mind in these trade relationships. One thing that I've used effectively, and I think it would also be effective in Mexico, is to look at where China is geographically located and where Latin America is. And there's nothing that they're finding in Latin America that they couldn't find in Asia or even on the African continent. The only reason for being in Latin America is because it's an irritant to the free nations in the Western Hemisphere. Yep. And I think they're beginning to realize that, and I think there's opportunities if we just continue to highlight that and talk to the governments. I mean, if a democracy fails in the Western Hemisphere, China celebrates. If a democracy becomes safer, more secure, stronger, with opportunities for its own people, we become stronger here in the United States, as do they. So that's,
thank you.
That's my idea.
Good. And speaking of stronger, safer democracies, Ambassador Glass, on Japan, as you know, Japan has recently made significant decisions to invest further in defense to combat China's expansionist policy as well as North Korea. How do you expect the United States to deepen its defense ties with Japan in a way that would meet our goals, President Trump's goals of peace through strength?
Senator, thank you very much for the question, and that clearly is probably the greatest priority I have as I go over there, if confirmed. If confirmed, one of the functions that we're working with the Japanese right now that we can certainly improve upon and focus is the multilateral relationships that they have with other countries, specifically Korea and the Philippines. And then to show the importance of what that means to the Trump administration is working within the Quad. That was a relationship that was brought together by Secretary Rubio for the first meeting with foreign leaders that he had just a few weeks ago. And so that's India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. So we can work to further those relationships to push back against China. We certainly, on the military side, Japan is increasing their military spend. They've now come out and announced that they'll reach 2% by 2027, and the Prime Minister even said that they can exceed that if the situation deems necessary. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For more than 80 years, the U.S.-Japan alliance has acted as a cornerstone of peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. With communist China, Russia, the Korean Peninsula, Taiwan Strait, all within 200 miles of the Japanese soil, our forward deployed presence in Japan is fundamental to deter aggression in the region. This is especially pertinent given Beijing's dramatic military buildup and increasingly provocative actions. Gray zone activity tactics, saber rattling, all to force our allies and partners to bend to their will. Additionally, the alliance forms the foundation of vital multilateral cooperation from the Quad to trilaterals to South Korea, Australia, the Philippines. I was pleased to see President Trump and Prime Minister Shiba commit to pursue a new golden age of U.S.-Japan relations when they met in February. Not only did the President reaffirm our unwavering commitment to defense of Japan, but importantly, Japan committed to fundamentally reinforce its own capabilities, as Mr. Glass just mentioned. Mr. Glass, in order to strengthen mutual deterrence and response capabilities, it's critical that we work to turn the U.S.-Japan alliance into a truly interoperable military alliance. However, this will require Japan to go beyond the previous defense spending commitments, which you already mentioned they are. If confirmed, could you build upon some of the things you just talked about on how we can enhance that defense and security cooperation and what you, as our ambassador, can do to facilitate that?
Thank you very much for the question, Senator. If confirmed, clearly in the last question, this becomes a tremendous priority. Japan lives in a very tough neighborhood. And as you mentioned, whether it's China, Russia, North Korea, it's all in their backyard. And so working together with them is of critical importance. And I think if we look from a business standpoint on the economic side, our job is to support them in every way that we can to grow both of our economies together. But on the technical side, we clearly need to work on our cybersecurity with Japan. We are the best in the world at that. We can certainly help in that methodology. We can also help in the world of co-production. One of the issues that I've seen, and as you know, as we come in from the outside, we don't have the ability to be able to dig very deep into these issues. But Japan currently has an over $50 billion backlog for military equipment from the United States. And in that procurement process, none of this is moving along very quickly. And so between F-35s, transport planes, all of this to thwart the pressure that China is placing on Japan, and we're also placing the pressure that we need Japan to be the tip of the spear in how we push back. And so we need to figure out a way to get that procurement quickly, work on the supply chains. One of the things that I have been doing a little bit of reading on is the co-productions of some of these materials. Co-production of AMRAAM missiles, that kind of item. I mean, it's always difficult to change ways, especially if you're a government, but that just seems to be a much more efficient way to do business and to be able to give them the ability to help us push back against China.
Yeah, and that would help with the interoperability, absolutely. So thank you for that. And you mentioned, security is the foundation of the U.S.-Japan alliance. Economics is its lifeblood. You mentioned economy there, getting both of our economies to be prosperous. It certainly is the case for my home state of Nebraska. Thanks in part to President Trump's trade deals with Japan during his first term, Japan is one of our largest export markets, and certainly the largest for pork and eggs, our second largest for beef, our third largest for corn and overall ag exports. Japan is also a promising market for grain-based fuels. I was encouraged by Japan's recent announcement it intends to blend 10% ethanol in gasoline by 2030 and 20% by 2040. And of course, Japan is positioned to become one of the largest export markets for sustainable aviation fuel that rely on grain-based ethanol and feedstock. So it's great opportunities there to be able to build the economics there. I want to just move on real quickly. I know I'm running out of time here. Ambassador Johnson, if you're confirmed, what actions will you take to strengthen collaboration with Mexico to secure our southern border? And I may have already hit upon this stuff already, but if you could just briefly recap for us, that'd be great.
Sir, basically, I think it's to establish a dialogue with them to ensure that they realize that the problem is not just our problem, it's their problem as well. We talked about providing a way that they can secure the politicians and the government officials that want to do the right thing in Mexico, but now they are coerced and their families are threatened by these terrorist cartels. And I think if we can do those two things and we can increase information sharing and protect officials that want to do the right thing, it'll make a big difference.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Merkley, you're next.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Johnson, one of the concerns we have about fentanyl is it coming over the border from Mexico. And my understanding is the main two ways that we detect it are with dogs and with highly sophisticated scanners. Is that your understanding?
Take care. We're going to wind up pretty quick, I think.
Thank you, Senator. It is my understanding that those are two of the primary tools. Yes, sir.
Is there another primary tool?
There are other tools that could be developed that are available. Part of that would include human intelligence that's collected by law enforcement authorities and intelligence officials. Yes, sir.
And that intelligence often comes from a highly cooperative relationship with folks deep into Mexico who are tracking the whole entire route of production, ingredients, and so forth. So that relationship is very important. Senator Ossoff has a bill to fund the installation of scanners that are currently sitting in a warehouse that are designed for detecting fentanyl. Do you support getting those scanners and actually using them?
Sir, I don't have the details on that, but I would certainly think that is something that we should absolutely consider. I think fentanyl is a serious enough plague on the United States, on our citizens, that we need to look at every front and every step we can take to improve.
We'll get you details on that because I think it merits attention. I was appalled to understand that scanners are being left in a warehouse. Mr. Hoekstra, are you an advocate for free speech?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Does that include people expressing opinions that you disagree with?
Absolutely, yes.
So if an American is resident in Canada, should they, under Canada's also is free speech nation, should they be free to express their opinion on world affairs?
American citizens present in Canada or any foreign country have an obligation to, to live under the laws of that country.
Well, I'm asking about Canada specifically, and they have free speech rules. Should American Canada be able to express their opinion about world affairs?
Within the framework of the Canadian legal system, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So, and that includes things that the President or the Prime Minister of Canada disagrees with?
If the should Americans be able to say something in Canada that the Canadian Prime Minister disagrees with?
Yes.
That is an American value. If it is consistent, I believe, to my background, I don't know all the specifics of Canadian law, but if confirmed, I will take a look at it. And obviously, you've got some concerns here that I would be more than willing to, work with you and see exactly what concerns or
Well, I've
issues that
always
you may see
viewed
out
the
there.
United States as a champion of free speech.
Yes.
But we have the situation with the advocate who expressed concerns about the situation in Gaza, being detained, arrested by the U.S. government last week in New York, and was arrested because of his opinion differing with the president's. Don't you think that's very un-American?
Again, I know something about this. I'm not an expert, but the understanding of the I'll probably get into. I don't know all the legal ramifications for this individual who was in the United States, under what status and what rights he exactly has. So
He was here under a green card. Don't people on green card have freedom of expression in the United States of America?
again, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have the legal background on this. This is something that you really need to take
If the
up.
United States is detaining people because their views disagree with the president's, doesn't that set a very bad precedent for the world?
I think you have to take a look at exactly what status they have in the United States and what freedoms under U.S. law those individuals have. That is,
So if somebody is in the U.S. and they express an opinion that the President of the United States doesn't like, they should be free to express that.
if their status, depending on, this will all, it's a hypothetical question in terms of what they've
It's
said.
not that
and
hypothetical.
what-
We just
and
have a case of somebody under a green card being arrested for their opinion on a war in Gaza.
I don't.
I support free speech. I support people being able to say lots of things the president disagrees with. Don't you?
I agree. I agree on free speech. I agree that people should be, and America should be allowed to speak, express their views consistent with the legal requirements and the legal boundaries by which they are here in the country.
Well, I hope with that viewpoint, you will call up the president and say, we need to not arrest people for their views on foreign policy here in the United States of America, that it's wrong under our Constitution, it's wrong under the law, it's wrong under the example we set around the world, that we are going to be champions of freedom, not folks who take political prisoners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator, there's a difference between free speech and giving aid and support to people who...
Mr. Chairman, do you have any evidence that this individual gave aid and support? Because there's been no evidence provided by the administration. So I do not
would
think we should
disagree with that.
accuse somebody who opposed the war or opposed circumstances unless you have evidence for that.
Appreciate your views. Senator Rosen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Risch, Ranking Member Shaheen, for holding this hearing today. Thank you to the witnesses for your previous service and again for being here. I want to talk a little bit about counter-narcotics efforts. So, Ambassador Johnson, as you're aware, Mexico is one of the United States' closest partners. We share a 2,000-mile border that contains 47 active land ports of entry. I proudly represent a state with a large Latino population, many with having family ties to Mexico. I've also helped advance legislation to stop the flow of deadly drugs across the southern border by cracking down on transnational criminals, but I know that we cannot combat this crisis alone. We have to work closely with our partners like Mexico to address the flow of illicit drugs coming into our country. So, Mr. Johnson, can you speak to the importance of U.S. support for counter-narcotics programming? And do you think that it is in the United States' best interest to cut funding for programs that that combat the flow of illegal drugs in our hemisphere? And how do you think Mexico would react to a decision to cut that funding that helps combat the flow?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and thank you for your efforts, which I am sure have saved American lives. It's something that the flow of illegal drugs is something that we can't immediately turn off completely. I think it's a continuing process, It's improvements that have to be made as quickly as we can. We absolutely are more effective if we work with partners, and not just Mexican partners, but partners throughout the region. And that's why I think organizations like JTF Bravo and JTF Alpha play such an important role, because that includes a presence from a lot of the countries in the region, and we can share that information. And I think that's key to continuing to improve at a steady rate. I think Mexico is
So
it wants
continuing
to
to
do
improve
that.
collaboration, funding, to be sure that we're meeting all the future threats, current and future, be prepared for future threats, you would say.
Yes, Senator, I agree, and I know there's a review going on right now of a lot of those programs. There have been waivers granted already, and I am confident that throughout the review process, those programs that have the greatest impact will continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to move on to you, Ambassador Hoekstra, the Five Eyes Alliance, of which Canada is a member. It's one of the most successful intelligence sharing alliances in the world. It's been key to U.S. military responses, including in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and yet the Trump administration has taken actions that have caused our allies to reconsider what information can be shared with the United States. So, Ambassador, the Five Eyes Alliance is based on a high level of mutual trust. That's how all relationships, the foundation, right? So in your opinion, do you think it makes us safer or stronger if our allies decide to scale back the intelligence that they share with us out of concern that they can't trust the United States?
I've spent a lot of time on Five Eyes. I spent a lot of time on intelligence. And it's clear that the cooperation, Five Eyes is unique. It's unique internationally. And each of us brings certain strengths to that relationship. And it is critical that...
So are you willing to fight to be sure that it remains resilient and fully operational?
Absolutely. You brought up, the continuing threat of transnational organizations, okay? On those kinds of issues, those kinds of threats, we talked earlier with the ranking member about fentanyl. It's not a huge amount that goes across our border from Canada, but we can expect...
Tomorrow it could be something else.
Tomorrow could be something else. And closer, because I think what we're looking at is these relationships and taking the relationship of Five Eyes and applying it to law enforcement and those types of things, building our relationship will enable us potentially to get a better handle of fentanyl and drugs coming across the border, whether it is from Mexico, whether it's from Canada, or somewhere else.
So I think we're in agreement that our strength and safety and security around the world is based on levels of trust, our partnership, collaboration, and cooperation with our allies to fight against those who wish to harm us.
If confirmed, I will do everything that I can to strengthen that relationship on Five Eyes, law enforcement, cooperation, trade. Those are all opportunities to make to make Canada and America safer, secure, and more prosperous. Closer cooperation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your testimony. Mr. Glass, let me start with you. One of the things the previous administration focused on was trying to strengthen the relationship between South Korea and Japan, two very important partners. Simple question. Do you agree that that was a worthwhile endeavor, and will you work to build on it?
Not only worthwhile, but essential. And absolutely, we were talking earlier a little bit about the priorities of the multilateral relationships that Japan has with other countries in the region, and it's critical that we continue to build on that.
I think you recognize that when our colleagues from partner countries like Japan and South Korea have come to the United States over the last couple of years, they weigh in on the importance of the U.S. supporting the Ukrainian people in their fight against Putin's aggression, because they recognize that our commitment to Ukraine can have implications for all of them. As many of us say,
President Xi keeps one eye on Ukraine while he keeps one eye on Taiwan. Do you agree that if there's a perception among our allies that we're throwing Ukrainian people under the bus, that damages our relationship with Japan?
The Japanese have supported the Ukrainians not only with economic support, material support, and conscious support. But at this point in time, the question that apparently is very simple is very delicate. We have a president that's got both sides of the Ukrainian and Russian conflict sitting at a table across from each other. And at this point in time, I think the delicacy of what he is working as our negotiator in chief is something that I don't want to make any comment that might possibly disrupt that process.
My time's limited. I will just say, at the most recent G7 meeting, and as you're well aware, Japan's a part of the G7, right?
Correct.
At the most recent G7 meeting, our allies all supported continuing to keep the language from previous G7 resolutions, which named Russia and Putin as the aggressor. Did they not?
They did.
They did. And it was the United States that said we should remove that, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. In my view, that sends a terrible signal, not just to the people of Ukraine, but to people in Japan and South Korea and our partners around the world. And cutting off intelligence, even temporarily, and throttling weapons to Ukraine when you have a massive arsenal on the Russian side, in my view, is so contrary to American national security interests and I hear the same thing from our colleagues in Japan and elsewhere. Mr. Hoekstra, it's good to see you. We chaired the Dutch caucus back in the House. Let me just say, I was at a hearing yesterday in the Banking and Housing Committee where the testimony from the economist there, who, by the way, was invited by our Republican colleagues, was unambiguous, that when you increase tariffs across the board on products from Canada, including Canadian lumber, you will drive up the cost of housing in the United States. And the fact of the matter is the National Association of Home Builders chief economist predicts that it will be as much as $7,500 to $10,000 additional on a home for the average American if the proposed tariffs go through. I mean, you can do some simple math. You don't have to be an economist, neither do I, to recognize that will increase the costs and make homes less affordable in the United States, right?
If the tariffs put that in place, yes, it's not brain surgery.
Thank you. I appreciate the reality touch, and I also appreciate your response to Ms. Rosen's question, Senator Rosen's question on the Five Eyes. I mean, you have a lot of experience there. You agree that Canada's contribution to the Five Eyes is valuable, right?
Canada, we have a great alliance with Canada on national security issues. It would help if Canada met its NATO commitment. They're one of 8 or 9 countries that falls short, significantly short, with no real plan to get there anytime soon. Their statements have said, well, we'll get there 27
I
or
agree,
32.
but within relating to Five Eyes, were they an important partner as part of that?
Five Eyes is an important relationship, and all the countries have strengths that they contribute to it.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Johnson, finally in closing, Senator Rosen raised the point about the funding for our efforts to interdict narcotics. Are you aware of the fact that one of the programs that was terminated by the Trump administration's freeze was an anti-narcotics program aimed at stopping imported fentanyl? Are you aware of that? Have you seen that reporting?
Thank you, Senator. I've been out of the government for a little over 4 years now. I have not seen it. I look forward to seeing it. I am confident that throughout this process that anything that helps stem the flow of fentanyl will survive. And
well, I hope you're right about that, because we had a meeting with Pete Morocco, and I did not get any sense of confidence in that. That was my takeaway anyway. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ambassador Johnson, I appreciate your years of military service. and the glowing recommendation that Senator Scott provided. I do have some questions, however, about some of your actions as ambassador to El Salvador. You pointed out in your opening statement, or maybe it was a response to a question, that democracy and freedom are very fragile. Amnesty International, among others, has reported on the use of the NSO Group's Pegasus spyware on journalists and members of civil society organizations in El Salvador on a massive scale. And there have been articles in El País and that have described how your close friendship with President Bukele in El Salvador when you were ambassador led to a downplaying of your criticism of his anti-democratic and authoritarian tendencies. Were you ever made aware that President Bukele was using surveillance on civil society actors or on U.S. government employees while you were ambassador?
Thank you, Senator. I was not aware that they had employed Pegasus against anyone in El Salvador. I don't doubt that it could have happened, but I was not aware of it. I was constantly emphasizing to everyone that I spoke with, from President Bukele throughout his government, that there must be no surveillance on anyone that works for the embassy, that we all have a responsibility to meet with opposition members, to meet with private society, to meet with business, and that doesn't imply that we support any one side more than we do the other, but it's a requirement that we have, and it's a requirement that I've taken very seriously.
There were also reports that one of the embassy employees who was investigating some of these undemocratic activities of the president was fired summarily for that. Were you aware of that? Were you involved in any decision to fire anyone who was investigating President Bukele's authoritarian activities?
Thank you, Senator, and we discussed that with your staff yesterday, and I appreciated their time. I know you're busy. I was aware that we had an incident that involved a contractor, not an employee, but a contractor who had been in country for a long time. I was a little surprised when I heard that he had had an unauthorized meeting with a member of the press. And I did what I think any manager would do at that point. I called in his department heads, and I called in security, and I said, we need to investigate this and determine whether or not these accusations are true. And if they are true, I think we need to determine what kind of information might have been passed. And I defer to his boss, really, as to what the final disposition should be in that case. But I know one of the first questions that I've always received on any security clearance interview is, have you conducted any unauthorized meetings with the media or the press? And apparently this individual had.
Well, I appreciate that, but part of my concern about, and the reason for this line of questioning, is you talked in your opening statement, and others have pointed out the challenge in Mexico, which has been in lots of ways a great neighbor and partner, but in other ways, because of what's happening there with cartels, with the gangs, that it's also really challenging. And any hint that anyone in America might be willing to overlook corruption activities sends a very bad message to Mexican authorities and to the Mexican people. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Senator, I strongly agree with that.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador Glass, I just have one question for you, and that is, last week, excuse me, President Trump suddenly called our defense alliance with Japan a bad deal and unfair. You pointed out in one of your statements that we've actually been at the apex of the relationship between the United States and Japan. So can you explain to me why the president would be calling out that relationship and suggesting that our agreement with Japan is a bad deal and unfair?
Thank you for the question. It is in any relationship, especially from the business standpoint, the closer you are, the more transparent you can be about discussions. And in those discussions, money is always part of it. And so I appreciate President Trump's honesty and transparency in that case, because in actuality, it makes my life a lot easier. We know that we would like the Japanese to focus on increasing their spend on military. They've agreed to bump that up to the 2% GDP level by 2027. And actually, the Prime Minister came out and said if it needs to be a little bit higher, that's something we can discuss. So I look forward to discussing that with the Japanese and being able to come out with something on the that is favorable for both sides.
Good, and I think it's fair to say that in your opening statement, you pointed out the importance of our alliance with Japan and the importance of that defense relationship as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Glass, if I might just continue in this general direction, because I didn't get a chance to question you at all in the first round. Thank you for your willingness to continue serving and representing our nation. I think you served well as ambassador to Portugal. My thanks to Mary and the rest of your family for your willingness to step back into the fray. And for sharing with folks that your faith is the underpinning of your public service. I think that's constructive when people do that. I agree with you that the U.S.-Japan relationship at the end of the last administration was in a very strong and good place, and that the progress that was made in pulling together Korea, Japan, and the United States was a significant step forward. I am concerned about the future direction of that trilateral relationship because of unfortunate recent developments in Korea. Just help me understand what you might do as ambassador to help strengthen or sustain that work. Senator Hagerty and I and a bipartisan group went out to both Japan and Korea last August to try and reinforce and give some lift to it. But since then, there's been some dramatic intervening events in both Japan and in Korea.
Right. Senator, thank you for the question, and thank you for your interest in the region. It's very important. If confirmed, I think we all have to be patient to see what happens with South Korea. That's currently in effectively a state of turmoil, and we'll have to see what comes out of that. But no doubt, it's a step backwards in trying to build that relationship between not only the bilateral relationship between the Japanese and the Koreans, but with the trilateral that we have working. I think in most of these cases, and what I've seen in that, and once again, coming from the outside, we don't have as much information as maybe we will in a few weeks if confirmed, but by the way I'm looking at it, it seems to be that a lot of the issues that we're discussing are too broad. And I think that we can narrow those down between the three countries, and it would be very helpful. A lot of times when you're that broad, it's difficult to make advancements in what we're looking to do, whether it's on the security side, the economic side. But if we can narrow those down and really get to work and dig in on a very specific number of issues, I think that would be a tremendous help.
Two more things, if I might. I recently met with a large group of Japanese CEOs who came to just sort of increase their engagement and visibility. They are very concerned about a potential trade war inspired by tariffs that might be improvidently imposed. I'm not going to ask you to respond to this, but in my previous questioning of Ambassador Hoekstra, sometimes President Trump engages in public bluster about matters that are framed as a negotiating tactic. I think for the Japanese in particular, it's profoundly unsettling for them to not be clear about our relationship, and I tried to provide some reassurance about the deep bipartisan respect for their hosting 60,000 U.S. troops in Japan, as you referenced. The Special Measures Agreement is coming up for renegotiation in 2027. I'm concerned that our president is often someone who likes to drive a hard bargain by framing before negotiating. How will you help the administration appreciate the significant amount of contributions the Japanese have made over decades to basing our troops, to providing us with some significant but unquantifiable benefits from being a trusted and reliable anchor, ally, and partner, both militarily as well as economically in the region?
Yeah, but thank you for the question. It certainly is daunting as you look at the amount of issues, and it's daunting when you look at the amount of money. I mean, when the Prime Minister talked about a direct investment into the United States of upwards of $1 trillion. I mean, these are, I mean, it's difficult to comprehend those types of numbers. But we've had a consistent support by the Japanese for our military in and around $1.4 billion a year, and it's been fairly consistent for a while. And undoubtedly, since the first administration to now, the sophistication of the Chinese is grown tremendously. And war has gotten, or not necessarily war, but a conflict or a push back and forth has gotten significantly more expensive. And so housing the troops has done that, whether we have weapon systems that we need to upgrade, command and control that we're going to be upgrading along with the Japanese. That's going to be these are very expensive ventures. And so undoubtedly, I do believe we're going to have to go to the Japanese and talk about an increase in that support.
Well, if I could, in closing, I'm grateful the Japanese have actively participated in supporting Ukraine in its fight. I hope we will encourage them to continue to do that and recognize that they, from halfway around the world, have been a part of that effort. And the move towards developing a real counterstrike capability by Japan, I hope will lead to co-production and purchasing and deployment of Tomahawk missiles, as well as other advanced systems. And I look forward to working with all three of you in your next postings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If possible, I have one afterwards in the next couple of weeks as we go through this process, we'll still be here, and I would avail myself at any point in time to come in and talk through that with you.
Thank you, Ambassador. As the ranking member of the East Asia subcommittee about to go to the region with Senator Ricketts, I would very much welcome that. All three of you have been chosen to represent the United States for absolutely critical allies, and I hope that we can together sustain these trusted and long-standing relationships.
Well, thank you much. Senator Cruz is supposedly on the way, and he has some probing and in-depth questions for you, I'm sure. But in the meantime, this is unusual, but we don't get dead time here very often. But if any one of the three of you want to add something for the record, having heard the questions that have been given to you, you're welcome to take up the time. Otherwise, we'll sit and look at each other until Senator Cruz gets here. So.
Sir, if I could, I would just amplify what my colleague here said. We are willing to continue to meet, and should we be confirmed, we look forward to working with all of you on your issues. We certainly understand this has been a very busy time here on the Hill, and we appreciate you taking the time for this hearing today. It means a lot.
Could I make one random comment, Mr. Chairman? Could I just note?
Randomness is your strong suit.
It's my strength. Could I just note and compliment Ambassador Hoekstra on specifically recognizing Ambassador Cohen and Ambassador Shefali Dougal and your ongoing engagement relationship with them. I suspect the other two nominees have also engaged, but I just would urge you to. Our recent ambassadors in those two countries were very strong and are people I've interacted with directly, and I think have a significant reservoir of recent experience that could help inform your service.
Well, thank you, Senator. I would just add to that, this panel is a particularly strong panel, particularly with the experience that they've had, and we're certainly happy that you're willing to serve. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, congratulations to each of you on your nominations. Good to see you. Thank you for your willingness to serve our nation yet again. Ambassador Johnson, let me start with you. As you know, a topic that we discussed in my office last week. In 1944, the United States and Mexico signed a treaty to manage the water from the Colorado, Tijuana, and Rio Grande rivers. This treaty requires Mexico to provide 350,000 acre-feet of water annualized over 5 years. However, Mexico has consistently failed to uphold its end of the bargain. We are nearing the end of the current 5-year cycle, and Mexico is behind by over 1 million acre-feet of water. The results have been catastrophic for Texas farmers and towns. Entire industries are dying. This crisis simply cannot be allowed to continue. As you and I discussed, this issue colors every single aspect of our relationship with Mexico. Last year, I introduced language to impose real cost on Mexico for these failures. I intend to advance that language again this year. However, in the meantime, the State Department already has the power to hold Mexico accountable. I'd like to work immediately and closely with you to address this issue. As you know, I also discussed this issue with Secretary Rubio, including in this committee. He agrees that addressing this crisis must be a priority. Talk to us about this a little. What options do we have to secure Mexico's compliance with the treaty?
Sir, thank you for the question, and thank you for your time recently to discuss it. I'll confess I didn't know what the 1944 Water Treaty was until you brought that up. It is, of course, a concern to me when anyone is impacted in the United States because of another country's failure to meet their obligations. That said, I know the current government in Mexico is relatively new. I think they were about 4 years behind in providing water at the rate they had committed when President Sheinbaum took office. I think it's important to contact them immediately, frequently, and make sure they understand that they are getting behind on their commitment, and make sure that they understand what the outcome could be if they do. I know when we discussed it, you were very adamant that you've been a big supporter of Mexico, but it could go the other way if they fail to meet their obligations. And I will deliver that message, and I will deliver it consistently, as will the other officers that represent the U.S. government in Mexico. I look forward to working with you on the issue, and I think we can make progress.
Well, it's worth underscoring that I've authored and passed through this committee and into law legislation expediting the permitting of 4 new bridges from South Texas to Mexico. So when it comes to legal and lawful trade between Texas and Mexico, I'm an enthusiastic supporter. However, if they flout their treaty obligations to the detriment of Texas farmers and Texas residents, that is a real problem. If confirmed, how do you view your role in helping alleviate this crisis?
Thank you, Senator. Again, I think obviously will not be, if confirmed, will not be involved in making policy, but implementing policy and informing policy. My job, as I see it, is to continue to work with you and your office and other members of Congress, as well as with the White House and the State Department and other offices in the U.S. government and the Mexican government to make sure that we all understand what those commitments are and that we are keeping a sharp eye on them meeting the commitments. I think the key in this case is they're behind more than they could catch up in these final months. So I think if we ensure that water is delivered early and on time and in compliance with the agreement that's made, I think we'll see a great improvement.
Thank you. Ambassador Glass, as you know and as you've said, the U.S.-Japan alliance is a cornerstone of U.S. security interests in the Indo-Pacific. Our Japanese allies are critically important for advancing our interests in preserving peace and security both in the Indo-Pacific and across the globe. And of course, a strong U.S.-Japan relationship is crucial to countering China's global malign activities. The Trump administration recognizes this core reality, and I'm heartened that the administration and this committee is expeditiously advancing your nomination. Your role will be crucial. Within the region, the Quad, Australia, India, Japan, and the U.S., is critical to our security architecture. Talk a bit about the Quad and the role of Japan within it.
That's a great question, Senator. Thank you. While I was in Portugal, we actually 8 years ago, when President Trump started redeveloping and introducing the Quad as a format, we actually had Quad meetings once a quarter with India, Australia, and Japan. And we're holding that as to taking a look at the global issues that were affecting Europe at the time. I come to find out how valuable that group really is. These are tremendous allies, and our ability to work with them only shows the Chinese that we have, it's not just us standing alone. So that Trump administration vision of a free and prosperous Indo-Pacific is only carried by our ability to work within that entire region. Japan's
So I'm
critical.
also very worried about China's control over global supply chains, especially in key sectors that affect our national security. Can you tell me how you plan to help Japan diversify its supply chains and reduce its economic reliance on China, and also in particular focus on critical minerals and how we can expand our our bilateral cooperation in this space?
I have a bit of a background in critical minerals, and it's something that if we can break that supply chain from China, it frees we have economic freedom to move forward in so many different sectors, specifically technology. But we have to build a reserve in America. And there are private entities that are doing that right now that I'm aware of, but also the U.S. government. We have a reserve for our military, but we don't have a reserve for industry. And so as we go out and begin mining and working with other countries around the world, we've got to be able to create a reserve that we can share with our allies to make sure that we keep this economic flow in the supply chain going. I mean, I hate to use the phrase, but it's critical that we get that done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We will add letters of support that the committee's received for each of you to put into the record. For the information of the committee, the record will remain open until the close of business tomorrow, Friday, for members of the committee to submit questions for the record. If you do get some questions, I hope you'll answer them quickly. It'll help us move along your confirmations. Again, thanks for your service. Thanks to your family for assisting you in that service. And with that, committee's adjourned.